Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 103. I'm recording it on Tuesday, March 16th, 2021 at 8:18 p.m. And I was just attending an event commemorating people who have, contributed to their communities. And it's really inspiring. There's a lot of really good people in the world. All right, God. What I want to start with is that God appears and somewhat disappears, at least to our perception, and then reappears and back and forth emotionally. I guess basically emotionally. We have this sense of God's presence sometimes, and then sometimes much less so. And you have to wonder what that's about, right? I mean, yeah, the easy answer is, well, yeah, sometimes God is distant, sometimes, but I mean, that doesn't really explain much. Speculation. I tend to believe, and again, this is highly speculative, that there's kind of like a cognosphere, a sphere or a realm. It's kind of like, how like the Earth has the ionosphere, the atmosphere, the stratosphere, and all. This isn't like that. That it's a band of atmosphere, but it's that we seem to have. There seems to be a network, kind of like an intranet, like this physical internet we have, World Wide Web. There seems to be a spiritual, and I would have to say prototype to this, where you think of someone, and they on some level are aware of that. You think of God, and on some level you've made this connection, or amplified it. It's like, again, highly speculative, but it feels like there is an environment of thoughts and feelings and these kinds of experiences that are fleeting, that just come into our mind and leave, all just these impressions. So I mean, that's the nature of the world, apparently. And so, like, now let's try to tie that in together with our understanding of God. And that is, I guess one way to understand it is like that everything is God. So just like we with human brains, our conscious mind, well, dissimilarly to this, actually, our conscious minds kind of work. We think one thought, we think the next, we have one impression, one emotion, whatever. It's like sequential. It's called serial processing, like in computing. And then the other kind of processing is what goes on in our unconscious, which is referred to as parallel processing, in the sense that more than one, many, I imagine, processes are going on simultaneously, all within the unconscious. So like with this cognosphere, this realm where we think a thought, and all of a sudden that thought has existence. It's out there. It's being perhaps perceived by others. This may be a reflection of God's consciousness, that unlike ours, does parallel process everything. I mean, it's like Uber parallel processes, because like it's all God. Um, so, and it's important to reach that understanding with regard to God. Um, and then this is kind of like the understanding that God is not just one consciousness, even though, I think logically we have to ultimately conclude that yes, any consciousness other than this one must be considered a subconsciousness. So God, has this overall beingness, but within has an infinite number of consciousnesses. And infinite, again, like every time you use that word, that just like blows everything, it's amazing. But so yeah, so like what happens, so, you I guess that leads to seeing God in a different light, that, God as a committee, God as a collection of people. I mean, it could be the way God, again, like so much about God has to remain speculative. And I'm glad I'm delving into this kind of stuff today, because a lot of times I will stick to what I kind of know, what I've been through before, um, that I have relatively reasonable understandings about. This is like, you know, the cognosphere, this idea of God existing as an infinite number of consciousnesses. This is not ordinary, um, an ordinary understanding of God. It's just, and I think, it may be that our world is beginning perhaps to get poised for that kind of progress in our understanding of God, in our evolution as spiritual beings, also not just corporeal beings. Um, so, so yeah, God as, I mean, like, so what do you make of that though? I mean, like, fine, God is everything, God is every person, God is every consciousness. Like, so yeah, right now, right now there's 7.5 billion people on the planet, and each of them has a stream of thoughts going on in their mind, sometimes about other people, sometimes about people who have died, and we've got to bring them into the equation. Do their consciousnesses continue to exist, affecting us on this side? But again, so these are speculations people have made, what's the nature of our collective consciousness, if we have that. But when you bring God into it, it just like amplifies the surrealness, because God is all these, 7.5 billion consciousnesses, and then just add all the other life forms that exist in the universe. See, I like this. So like I'm getting this idea of God now as, everything. I mean, every conscious, and all right, we're talking consciousness. Let's talk rocks. Let's talk inanimate matter that doesn't certainly have the mechanism, the biology, or the way of experiencing or generating or receiving consciousness like we humans and other life forms. But it may experience a kind of consciousness that it's so beyond our current scientific understanding that it's complete speculation. We can't know it. I mean, but and again, like, for this series, the more I posit these questions about the nature of God and our relation to God, and what our nature is really, relative to God. Um, I think fine. I ask a lot of questions, and a lot of times the answers are not all that satisfying. But that's how science works. You'll have a scientist conducting 200-300 experiments, all failing in a sense, failing to do what the scientist is looking for, until something happens. So, like, this reaching into the unknown is something that's familiar to scientists, and I think it should become more familiar to people who are involved in religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And I think that would be a good thing, um, because to the extent we don't ask questions about God, who is God? Like, for example, like, we've been referring to God in the masculine for several millennia. And, most people don't take the time to think about this much, but that simple fact is powerfully influential, has powerful implications, consequences. And I know this. I'm feeling this from personal experience recently, because, like, recently I've been addressing or referring to God in the feminine, she, her, and and talking with her uh, in that way. It changes the character of the interaction. So and again, that's just one small example of what can be done and should be done to make more complete our understanding of God. Who God is, how God, and I mean, this is what science is about for the physical world. We're just, like, constantly asking questions, why? And the question in science is usually like, why is this happening? What's causing this to happen? So we apply this to God, like, I mean, yeah, and I have asked this question, why does, for example, the ultimate why question with God is, why does God create suffering? To my mind, it makes no sense. If I were God, I wouldn't have suffering anywhere. In my whole infinite, domain, kingdom, there wouldn't be any suffering at all, because I wouldn't see the sense of it. But that's not the reality we're in, and so we have to ask that question. And I mean, might as well get into this for a bit. Some people say, well, God had to create suffering, because if we didn't suffer, we wouldn't know what pleasure feels like. I don't believe that. That doesn't hold logical water. Let me try to think of a good analogy. We can, for example, like, exist in complete darkness our entire existence. I mean, theoretically, it's not a pleasant thing to imagine, but you can imagine that, and never having experienced light, and that would be our reality. Yes, it'd be a bit different than having this understanding of light also to contrast with, but it's not all that consequential, I don't think. Darkness is darkness. Or somebody could be born completely into light and never experience darkness, and it's the same thing. So with God, I think it's a similar kind of thing. Um, okay, so we've got about 13. I'm tired. I should Just basically get a bit better posture going here because, like, you know, this, when I slouch, it feels good for a while, but then it begins to hurt. All right, so sorry about so yeah, why yeah, let me return to this for a while. Why did God create pain, suffering? It's just, it doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah, one reason people say that, like, also, you know, without suffering, without pain, life would have less meaning. Maybe, maybe not. But I think the stronger point is, like, we as biological beings are not hardwired for meaning. We appreciate meaning, but meaning, as with everything else, success, prestige, whatever it is really just a tool. You know, what we are hardwired to crave, to seek, is pleasure, happiness, virtuous happiness, ideally. But that's who we are. You know, that is exactly who we are. And that's where the problem comes in. You know, like, for example, imagine you're a god and you create a life form. You can create this life form that, like, presumably you love, because I believe God loves us. You know, I believe, you know, love is a very important part of our existence, our creation. But you know, imagine that you're God and you're going to, like, create a being, a living being. Let's just one, you know, just to simplify everything. And you know, you want to love this being as much as possible. Now you've got two options before you. You can create a world for this being that has both pleasure and pain. And you've designed this being to well, yeah, right? And you've designed this being to be able to feel pleasure and pain, of course. That has to be part of it. So, like, so what happens then, you know, sometimes the being you've created is suffering. And I don't see how you would enjoy that, how that would make you feel good. Now contrast that to your God. And because you're God, you know, you create this being however you want, you know, literally in the strongest sense. And you create this God to, let's say, you know, only be able to feel pleasure. You know, pain just never comes into the equation because there's no biological, neurological apparatus wherein it would work. It's kind of like rocks can't feel pain. So, like, you know, so this being, your being, you know, can create, and like, you know, your being experiences complete pleasure and is completely loving, you know, because again, this is your being, you're creating her, him, however you'd like. Now, don't you think that'd be wouldn't you be more pleased with that kind of being than with a being that you're going to, like, oh, my being is suffering again? I think so. I think so. And sometimes you hear people say, well, you know, our suffering is good. Our suffering is good because our suffering helps us to grow, develop character. Yes, yes, suffering can evoke empathy, compassion. Suffering, yes, there's a lot of good that comes from suffering. There's good that comes from evil. You know, nobody's denying that. But again, if God can create beings, a being that, let's say, doesn't have to, you know, strengthen their character because their character, let's say, is already perfect. You know, again, like we see God as perfect and we human beings as imperfect. That was God's decision. God chose to do that. Now, God could have easily said, all right, and it's interesting because the Bible says, like, well, humans were created in the image of God, not completely. And, you know, it's kind of like blasphemous to believe we are, which is, you know, that's the reason, one reason the belief in free will is harmful, because it is blasphemous. It's like, you know, it's attributing to ourselves something that's reserved for God. All right, I've got 7.5 minutes left. Kind of like the way this this episode has progressed. Again, I'm not all that concerned with quality, which is fine. This is more of a, it's more, I guess, of a journal, a video journal. You know, what is it like? It's kind of like, you know, historically, which is some guy, you know, just pulling into God at this time of COVID, the distancing, just seeking stronger relationship with God for the benefits that it brings. And which is a perfect example of how God works sometimes, you know, like were the pandemic and the distancing not happening, I don't think I'd be on Zoom at all, you know, because I wasn't on Zoom before. And so this wouldn't have happened. So again, there's a lot of times things seem harmful, detrimental, and it turns out they have either silver linings or they're complete blessings in disguise. And actually, that's how I believe this whole pandemic and even the Trump presidency has been. I mean, like, you know, I'm a liberal. I've been trying to just like end the Republican Party for decades. One reason out of many, their denial of climate change. They're just like they're already having ruined the lives of your grandchildren and great grandchildren. I mean, unless, you know, something miraculous happens, and we shouldn't have to rely on miracles to safeguard the lives of our progeny. So so anyway, so like, you know, Trump and the coronavirus come along, you know, and in a matter of a few short years, just and it hasn't, you know, most people say it hasn't happened, you know, I don't see it happening, but wait, in a matter of a few short years, we will have ended the Republican Party. We know now, because it's as unsustainable as is our economy, is a lot of stuff relative to climate change. All right, back to God. And actually, you know, I just want to like mention again the reason, one reason I'm doing this God series is because before this, I was doing a series, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future, just basically describing how, unless we're exceedingly reckless, we will fast track the development, research, R&D for cell-based meat, this artificial meat that involves no cruelty to animals, but more importantly, relative to pandemics, just makes the risk of pandemic almost non-existent. So, you know, I was like, I did 60 episodes of that series. You know, I sent thousands of emails to news outlets, organizations, networks, papers, magazines, you know, with the basic outline of, because most people, you know, it's a new industry, just this ability to grow meat in labs. 2013, it's only about less than 10 years old. A lot of people don't know about it yet. So anyways, like, you know, after 60 episodes of that and the outreach, I noticed that people they don't care. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, maybe they're too wrapped up in what's going on with the pandemic right now to think about the future. But that's not, you know, that's not really it, because like people don't really care about climate change. So so that's why, you know, I chose to transition to doing shows, you know, basically, even though, you know, so many of these episodes are about me trying to present some ideas about God or asking some questions. You know, the basic purpose of this series was, well, I'm gonna, like, you know, instead of appealing to people who don't have a free will, you know, I'm appealing to God anyhow. Let me appeal to God directly. And so, yeah, so this isn't that direct. This is really indirect. I'm still talking to people for the most part now. If God, you know, could figure out a way to get me to talk to God, you know, to have these episodes be, you know, between, it seems a little rude, whatever, and polite, but, like, you know, to basically ignore the audience and just, like, you know, have these episodes be about God, I wouldn't be averse to that. And so this is a perfect example with about 2 minutes left of, like, see, this isn't up to me. I understand it's not up to me. I mean, like, I could try it and it'll either work or not. I'll feel good about it working or not. And that's not up to me. Or I won't, and that wouldn't have been up to me either, you know, because apparently I wasn't motivated enough. I didn't think it was a good idea, whatever. There's always a reason. So, all right, what else? With less than 2 minutes to go. Yeah, I've been feeling good. God, you know, it seems like a lot's going on. Sometimes God, you know, has nothing going on in your life. All of a sudden, just like, whoa, everything's going on everywhere. And good things, but it kind of, like, my focus is like, you know, all right, what should I be doing? You know, should I do this, that, whatever. All right, so all right, we've just done 28 more minutes of talking about God. Let's see. I should, you know, what I hope God does is inspire me to reach out to get a co-hosts or guests on this, because that would, you know, I think it'd make it easier and more enjoyable for me in certain ways, but we'll see. All right, so anyway, so got 42 minutes left, 42 seconds left. Thanks for watching. Catch this every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on White Plains Community Media, channel 76. If you get Optimum, 45, you get Verizon, and on YouTube and Facebook. Okay, so it's up there enough. And I'm pleased with this. You know, again, like, after 103 episodes, this is an experiment. See, you know, I'm seeing where it takes me, and I'm pleased with the results so far. God willing, I will see you again soon.